Let's see if we can't break the seal on this this valve cover now. So again, look for some place where you get some meat on the valve cover and you got something to pry against, something sturdy on the engine. So here's a good spot right here. Got this little trim tool kind of wedge shaped thing here. Just give it a steady pressure in the upwards direction, and if it feels like it's not wanting to move at all, don't force it too much, because you could always crack these plastic valve covers. And then also, just, you know, if it feels like it's stuck down really good, just double check, triple check that you got all your bolts all the way around undone. And that way you don't, you know, again, break this plastic cover. Here's another nice spot. Get a little bit of leverage underneath. Pop it loose there. Okay. Now we need to find something back here that we can grab hold of and get a little bit of leverage to pry this thing up a little bit more. Maybe in the back corner. I don't want to do it against this connector, but maybe the fuel rail. Let's see if I can get some leverage in here against something substantial. There's a bolt and a fuel rail. Let's see if that gets us anywhere. And you can use different types of pry tools, screwdrivers, whatever. Just be careful not to mar up any surfaces and pry too hard on the plastic, or it could crack. So just keep prying up in these little places. Keep some constant, steady pressure on it. You know, work these little seals with a little bit of WD-40, a little bit of tick against them, and just keep some constant pressure up, and it'll eventually pop loose like that. And then you can get your wiring harness out of the way. And slide this thing forward and take it out of the vehicle with hopefully both hands. But there you go. So there is your driver's side valve cover off. And again, you got that engine open over there. We're going to put our towels in there to keep anything from falling in there. I know you don't plan on anything falling in there, but that's why they call it an accident, because it wasn't planned for something to happen. And you just don't want to have to go at the best. You're fishing something out of this intake with a magnet. Worst, it's falling down on top of your piston and you can't get it. Quick overview of the bolts that hold down the driver's side valve cover. So there's 3 in the front here. Again, these little studs, you'll have to take those nuts and that bracket off to get to these. And then here, all the way around the back. Now there's no hold down in the back middle on this one. There's one here, there, and then just loosen these up with a little WD and kind of try to move them away from the seals of the spark plug tubes and things. That'll make it a whole lot easier to come off. You do not have to pull these cam position sensors. So in order to get the valve cover off of the passenger side, it's got this high pressure fuel pump in the way, and so we're going to have to unbolt that. And so we're going to undo these lines to the high pressure fuel pump. This is the high pressure side, and then the low pressure side coming in has got one of those normal squeeze slide on fittings. But we'll go ahead and crack the high pressure side first. So get yourself something to soak up any spills of gasoline. I've got a little bit of this absorbent mat here. We'll slide that underneath the fitting. Hopefully that'll get hold of anything there. And like I said, this thing's been off for a couple of days, but still doesn't mean that there's not going to be something potentially stuck in there. So let's see if we can crack this loose. All right, it wasn't that tight, and there we go. So you see, it squirted just a hair out, but it's not so much the squirt, but it'll be the amount that runs out of this hose when we disconnect it too. There we go. Get that backed off all the way. There we go. And then pull it away, and it'll kind of dribble out for a minute. We'll catch all that with our little rag there, and then we'll undo the other side. Once you've got this broke loose, you can undo this bolt here that kind of holds it down. Get yourself a little bit more play in that line. Let it drain a bit. There we go. And that's probably pretty good. Okay, yeah, it's done. Now need to come over here and get some light on the subject. Now we need to come over here and get this low pressure side undone. So this clip, you just pull it off the back side like so. Slide it forward and the little teeth will come out of the fitting. Of course, it's got a little tether as well that wants to hold it in place. Makes it a little bit tricky sometimes, but there you go. You'll get it. And now you'll need a special tool to slide in between where these two go to unlock the little tabs inside of this catch so that we can slide that back. And again, we'll put some rag underneath here because it'll dribble out some fuel. Alright, so let's get this low pressure fuel line at the high pressure fuel pump. You're going to need one of these tools like this. They've also got little plastic ones, but basically you need to find the right size to go around your fuel line here and close up. Try and get you where you can see. Hopefully that's visible. Once it closes around the fuel line, you want to wiggle it and push it into the fuel line right there. And then whenever it goes inside, then you can wiggle off the hose. There you go. And then I've got this towel down here to catch the mess. Let me try it with the other hand. Come on. All these little Christmas trees are hanging up on me. I'm gonna have to use both hands, but you can see what's got to happen here. This pushes in and it releases the tabs. I'll show you in higher detail when I take it. All right, so I switched over to my little plastic one. Seemed to work a little bit better, but basically this thing slides in and it pushes these little tangs apart that are inside of here and lets that slide off of there. And there really wasn't any too much fuel that came out of that. So I'm just draining that down in here, catching that a little bit, and we'll go ahead and move this pipe out of the way. That way we can unbolt our high pressure fuel pump. Let's go ahead and get this high pressure fuel line out of the way, and we're going to have to come back here, and it's tethered to the back side of the cylinder head here with an 8mm bolt, and then we'll have to undo it down here where it bolts up to the fuel rail. So getting to the other end of this high pressure fuel line is kind of tricky. So I found the best way to do it is with a crow's foot wrench. So get that 17mm crow's foot back there, and then you can use that to break it free. And then once it's broke free, most of the time these stainless connectors will just spin by hand. All right, once broke loose, you can get that loose by hand, and then you can take this line completely out of here and get it out of the way of this valve cover coming up. Okay, so now that we've got all the fuel lines and out of the way, we're ready to take off our high pressure fuel pump. It's held on with 3 bolts that are T45, so Torx 45, and this has a piston underneath it, and that's how it works. And so when you release the pressure off of this thing or loosen these bolts, we need to make sure that we do that evenly. So we're going to take each one of these, especially the 2 on the outside especially, need to come up the same amount. So you turn one a couple turns, turn the other a couple turns, turn the other one a couple turns, and just back and forth until you release the pressure off of the spring and piston underneath here. So this one here, it's just threaded into the plastic manifold. It doesn't hold any stress or anything like that. So we can go ahead and just take this one out and get it out of the way. All right, now these are the ones that we got to back out the same amount very slowly. back and forth, just until you'll feel it. The stress will relieve, the spring tension underneath it will be relieved, and then you can go ahead and remove these bolts. So I've got them backed out quite a bit. You see there's a gap now between that bolt head and where it bolts down, and you'll be able to wiggle this thing around. That's how you know it's time to, or it's safe to go ahead and remove those bolts completely. Now here's the first time that we're running into a bolt that we can't technically reuse, or at least not supposed to. Ford says these are torque to yield, and you need new bolts when you put this back on. So the part number is here for these new bolts, and they just, you know, they stretch, and so if you put them back in, you run the risk of this thing, because it takes so much pressure to pump this thing up, you run the risk of this thing popping loose. So that's the reason why they want you to get new bolts. All right, so I took the bolts out. Let's see what's under here. All right, there you go. So there's that high tension spring right there. There's a little cup and a piston inside of there that moves up and down, and some seals that need to be replaced as well. Here, these rubber gaskets, there's one around the outside and then one around each one of the bolt holes. So don't forget to replace those whenever you're putting this all back together. Now that we got our high pressure fuel pump out of the way and everything for the most part off of the top of this valve cover, we're going to go ahead and loosen these seals, lubricate those up, and take all of the bolts around the back, around the edges, and especially this one right back here. Okay, don't forget this one in the middle on the back, and loosen all of those bolts. And when you think you got them all, make sure you go around and get them all again. Just double check, and then you know, just like the other side, find a nice place to kind of wedge underneath and pop up, and then apply steady pressure until it releases. Once you've gone around the perimeter and loosened up all the bolts, and you've double checked and got all of them, there's one in the very front, one in the very back, in the center, then you just pry underneath one of the corners, and then the other corner, and you'll feel it kind of start to pop loose and pop up. Just give it some steady pressure once you start popping it up, and then she'll release. There we go. You just work it out of there. Get your hoses out of the way. There we go. And here is our passenger side valve cover. While I have this one off, I'll show you real quick. So this is the front side, obviously, and so you got one bolt in the middle and the front, these two, 3 across the back, 1, 2, 3 here. So those are the bolts, and again, just, you know, kind of use a little pick or something in between your spark plug tubes and this seal right here, because this will be the stickiest part. And then also around these little solenoids, put a little WD-40 on there. It really helps this stuff to pop loose. Just make sure if yours has got any cracks or anything like that, that you replace it. And don't forget, once you've got your valve cover taken off, you want to take all of your little rags out and stuff them in the open holes of the engine. Alright, so there we go. This has been not a hard job, but definitely not a fast job getting to this point. And this is a good time to test your timing chains. Make sure that they're not loose in any way, because some of the older Ecoboosts especially have a problem with these cam phasers getting a little bit weak on them, and then that timing chain will get loose and then it'll start rattling. This one doesn't have that issue, but if yours does, now is the time that you want to change the timing so you don't have to do all this again. So the next thing that we need to do in order to get, you know, freed up here to our timing cover is we're going to take off our thermostat housing and these remaining coolant lines. It's just held on by a bunch of 8mm bolts that go into that front cover, and I will take it off and then I'll show you those bolts. Okay, so to get this thermostat housing off, there are 8mm bolts around the edges, 2 of them that hold this outlet on here. There is one hidden one that you don't want to miss, and it's right under here inside this hole, and I've got it loosened up and all of these loosened up, and they're all the same size except for this top one, which is a long one. So you take them out and set them aside. Once you get all of them off, you ought to feel it pretty darn loose. Just kind of give it some outward pressure and wiggle, and it'll come off like that. There we go. Okay, now that I've got this thing off, let me just show you. There are two different bolt sizes that hold this thermostat housing and this outlet over here to the front cover. These short bolts, there's one there, 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 and then two longer bolts. One goes underneath and is hidden in that deep recess hole right there, and then this other one is the uppermost one that you'll be able to get. So that's where the bolts go, and this thing will pop off of there. It's got a bunch of gaskets and such that you'll want to replace as well. Alright, so we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel as far as access to this timing cover is concerned. Next thing we need to do is remove our serpentine belt and pulleys. And so while the belt is on here, let's loosen up these bolts that hold the water pump pulley on. And then we will get on the tensioner here and release this belt and get the rest of these idler pulleys out of the way. We will have to unbolt the alternator and roll it out to the side here to get it out of our way, but we won't have to take the cables off of it. And then we will go down here and we'll work on our AC compressor, the stretch belt, and removing our crank pulley. So like I was saying, while you still got your serpentine belt on, holding this pulley, go ahead and get your 10 mil on there and break all these bolts that hold that pulley on there loose. Now it's time to take our serpentine belt off. So it's a 15 millimeter on this tensioner. Back it off and with one hand and then just take the belt off of the pulleys and release the pressure. There we go. Now you can snake this thing out of here and get it out of your way. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and remove this pulley completely, and then these idler pulley and the tensioner, and that way we can get to all the bolts around the outside of the water pump. Now is a good time to replace the water pump because this is just sort of a wear and tear item. This car's got over 100,000 miles on it, and so you don't want to have to get back in this deep to do a water pump shortly after you've done this. Water pump pulley off, and the hardware just screwed back in here so we don't lose it. Alright, tensioners held on with two 10 millimeter bolts, one here and one down here. So get down in here, break those loose, go ahead and back them up. Try not to lose them. I'm going to have to do this with both hands so that I don't drop it, but you see what's going on. Okay, so now the tensioner's gone. Next thing is we're going to go ahead and remove our water pump. It's held on by a bunch of 8 millimeter bolts around the perimeter. I'll take them off and I'll show you on the bench here where they all go. Alright, so once you've got all the bolts out from the perimeter of the water pump, get your favorite pry tool and come right in here. They give you a nice little lip right there that you can use to pry on, and just put something back behind it, give it a little pop. Just like so, and then wiggle it and off she comes. Now the water pump is out of our way, and it's going to come with its gasket. If it doesn't, you can peel it off of there, but that's what that looks like. And of course you're going to want to replace the water pump, and if not the water pump, at least the gaskets. Okay, we really got a lot of room now. We're going to go ahead and do the next thing, which will be our alternator. We're just going to unbolt it and slide it to the side. It's held on by two 15 millimeter bolt down here and a nut up here. After we get that nut out off of the alternator, we're going to go ahead and remove the stud as well. That stud is a 7 millimeter. So let's get these things off of here. 15 mil. That one takes a little bit of torque to get that one loose. but the nut here, not so bad. There we go. I'll do that, and then I'll show you getting the stud here loose with a 7mm. There we go. It's actually quite easy to get that loose with a 7mm. And really, once you back off this nut a little bit, you don't have to take the nut completely off. You can just go ahead and remove this stud, as I'm showing. There we go. I'll go ahead and finish up on this 15 down here, holding the bottom of our alternator. There we go. Oh, that's nice and loose too. So now once it's broke loose, appears you can get that by hand. There we go. And then just wiggle the alternator and off she goes, and you just set it to the side here, out of the way. No need to undo any of the wires. Just make sure that you have your battery cable off so that you don't accidentally cause any arcing or fires. Just a quick look at the water pump and all the bolts. They're all the same size. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And like I said, once you get them all out of there, just come up in here in between the engine and this little nub right there, and just give it a little pry, and it'll pop right off. And there's going to be a couple of gaskets. There's a seal and O-ring inside of here, and then this gasket plate right here, both of which you'll want to replace if you don't replace the water pump, but I highly recommend you do the water pump anyway. Another quick tip: anytime that you take the bolts out of something and they're going to be loose somewhere, put them in a bag and tag it, and tell yourself what those go to, so that you don't have a bunch of random missing bolts or handful of random bolts you got to figure out if you want. Really opening up now. Okay, so the next step in this process is going to be to remove our crank pulley. And we're going to go ahead and leave this stretchy belt on here. It'll come off with the crank pulley. And so to remove the crank pulley, you can do it from above like this, or you can go underneath and come in through this area down here. You can, if you can lift the car or whatever, you can stand up in here and get a straight on view of this pulley. And there's a bolt in the center of it, and I'll show you that. And then there's a special tool, special puller that you're going to need in order to get that pulley off, and I'll show you that as well. Alright, so the easiest way for me to show you on the crank pulley here is to come up underneath like this, and there you go. And so you can see that pulley's held on by a bolt in the middle there. It's an 18mm, and the easiest way to get that thing off is with an impact. So get in there with a high power impact of your choosing and buzz that bolt right out. If you don't have an impact, I can tell you that these Ryobi, and I'll put a link in the description to this one, brushless, this PBLIW01. I'm not sponsored by these guys or anything like that, but this thing's got the oomph. It's an 18 volt, and there's only been one time that it wasn't able to break something free for me, and that one time I used a 4-foot pry bar and stood on it, and it snapped the end off the pry bar and didn't come loose. So this thing will do it for you. Alright, so here we are with our second bolt that's not supposed to be reused. So Ford says this is a stretch to yield bolt, so you need to get a new one and not reuse this one. So I'll show you that we have the new one here, and the part number on this thing, if you'd like to order one, is right here. So as I said, that crank pulley won't come off without a special puller. This is the puller you need, OEM 25090. This one works on both Ford and Chevrolet, and it looks kind of like this. You can probably rent one at your local auto parts store if you need to, but I'll show you how this thing works. So the way this thing works is you find one of these little rods that's a little bit longer than the bolt you've got. So this one here is the one we're going to use. And then you put that rod in here. And then you take this thing and you put it up in here, and these little grabber teeth are going to go up here and go behind these little pieces of the pulley. I'll show you. I'm trying to do this one-handed, guys, but they're going to go back here. That rod goes in the middle, and then see how that kind of slides over behind those pieces right there? And then you tighten this up right here, and it'll push on that rod against the inside of your crankshaft, and it'll pull this pulley off because it's just press fit onto the front of the crank. As it pulls that pulley off, it's going to also bring our little stretchy belt with it. I'll show you how this works. All right, so you put a 19 millimeter on the end and tighten it up, and it'll draw that sucker off. I like to use the impact for this. There she goes. All right. Now we'll go ahead and pull that thing out of there. Take our little rod out of the inside of the crank there. And untwist that. There we go. Let's put these pieces over here. And now we can get our pulley and take it out of the way. Here's the snout of the crank pulley where it goes in, and then this is the sealing surface right here for that crank seal. A lot of times when there's a oil leak on the front of these Ecoboost, it's actually from this seal right here leaking, and so we're going to replace that seal as well. You can see that seal right here. Now that does not appear to have been the problem with our oil leak. This one, if that was the problem, you would see oil everywhere, but our oil leak seems to be isolated to this edge of the timing cover, so we still haven't gotten to that yet. Now while we're down here, you want to go ahead and undo this little electrical connector. It's a pinch and squeeze, but it's got a lock tab on it, so we'll slide that back and then undo these little Christmas trees holding the wiring harness to the timing cover. I'll get a tool for that and take those off. And then this stretchy belt, you can replace it if you want, but a lot of times they last a really long time. All right, next thing we want to remove is going to be this wiring harness. So just pull the Christmas trees out that are tethering it to our timing cover, and then you got to undo this little connector here. It's got a white lock tab, so slide that back. And then I really like these hose puller pliers. I'll put a link in the description to any of these tools, but you can really use these things when you can't get a good grip on a connector. Kind of give it the old squeeze and pull, and it's a lot easier than on your fingers. All right, so almost everything's out of the way. You do not have to do anything with your AC compressor here. It is bolted to the side of the block and not to the timing cover. I was thinking we might could get away without having to take off this idler pulley, but there's a bolt right behind it, and so we're going to go ahead and take this pulley off so that we can get good access to that bolt. And it looks like that's probably just held on by that one bolt there, so I'll get that out. And this idler's held on with one 13 millimeter bolt in the middle. Once you get it broke loose, you can often just spin it out by hand. Removing this, the only reason why we're doing that is just to have better access to these bolts behind it, around the edge of the timing cover. There we go. So it looks like one of the last things that's going to be in our way is going to be this wiring harness that runs across the bottom of the front of the timing cover. And we're going to have to move it to get to the bolts behind it. Looks like it's kind of tethered with a couple of connectors, and looks like there may be a bolt that we can remove and a little bracket to get a little bit of freedom, a little bit of movement out of that, and so we'll do that here next. So this side over here, I was able to just sort of pinch and squeeze the little black plastic connector that's holding it to the bottom of the timing cover, and then it just sort of slid down and out of the way. This other side over here, I'm going to go ahead and remove this little bracket, the little 10 millimeter nut that's holding that bracket, and then hopefully that'll give us some freedom there. Kind of a greasy mess in here, but hopefully I can get this in the camera for you. So I took the little nut off of that stud right there, slide this bracket back, push it down, and then the wiring harness itself will come off of that stud also. And doing so is going to give us plenty of room to get to our bolts around the base of the timing cover. So I think that's going to be good enough for now. All right. Wow, it took a lot, but we're there, guys. We're there. We're finally able to get this timing cover off. So here's what it looks like when you're finally ready to pull this front timing cover. You got everything removed from the front here, and all of the 13 millimeter bolts around the perimeter are accessible. Don't forget your hidden one inside of here, this one here, and then we'll try and take this cover off. So I'm going around the perimeter, taking out the bolts. Now, a lot of them are the same size, but some of them are a little bit different. So in this case, I like to draw myself a picture of what I'm doing, taking apart, and then whenever I get a bolt out, I pop a hole in the cardboard here and just stuff it through there. That way I know where it goes back together when I go putting all this back together. All right, so now that all the bolts are out of the timing cover, let's take a quick look at them. All of these around the edge are the same size except for this, which is that 10 millimeter stud that was holding the bracket and the wiring at the bottom. Then you've got a couple of long ones here that are the hidden bolts in the middle, and then these also are longer bolts. So just a heads up. Okay, so all of the bolts are out of the timing cover now, and let me just for the third time tell you where the hidden ones are, because those will be the ones that you miss, and and when you pry this thing off, if you've missed those bolts, you'll break this cover. There's one right here that I forgot to tell you about earlier. Then there's one in this hole down here. There's one right there. Those are the three hidden ones. And then just go all the way around the perimeter, getting all the rest. And let me show you on the floor here. I've got them all stabbed into the cardboard so that we know where they go. And so you got your three hidden bolts here in the middle. And then these up here are a little bit longer. All of these around the edge are the same size except for this guy, which is the little stud that held on that wiring harness at the bottom. Alright, so we got all the bolts out. It's going to be a little bit hard to show you with one hand, but I'm going to try my best. So get in here, pry this cover loose, and then it'll just kind of wiggle it back and forth. And as long as you've got all of your bolts off, the thing should be able to come forward. And then you got to get it off the bottom down there, all the little doohickeys that it hangs up on. Let me show you. Let me get a light down there. Alright, so look down there. You'll see it tries to hang up on that electrical connector down there. Let me put this somewhere, hopefully where it will stay lit. And so we got to get past that electrical connector with that timing cover before we can come up. That's easier said than done with that wiring harness down there in the way. Let me use both hands. Sorry guys. All right, there we go. So I pulled it far enough away to get it past this little electrical connector so that we don't break that thing off of there. You can remove that that sensor there before you pull this timing cover, but it's not necessary as you see here. But now once it's pulled away, we can go ahead and carefully lift it up and take it out. Whew! Goodness gracious. All right, let's set it down here. And there it is. Okay, so this is the area where we had all of our oil leaks, and we'll take a look at this thing really closely on the inside, and also just to make sure, you know, was it a problem? See how that's got some good sealant right there, but then down here it's missing that sealant, and then it starts being good all the way around there. This is the part that was leaking, so it looks like we just had a sealant failure as a reason for this timing cover from the factory leaking here after, you know, only 100,000 miles or so. So we'll fix this up, get all this stuff cleaned up, replace all of these little gaskets, especially our crank seal there, and we'll put it back together. All right, we got that timing cover off. So while we was in there, it's always a great idea, like I said before, just check the tension on your timing chains, make sure they're good and tight. You can look at these tensioners down here and make sure that that piston's not pushed out too far. If that piston's pushed out way far, like this far away, that means that the timing chain has stretched too much. And this one looks good.